Imalo jedno vreme. Between the forest and the mountains of Bulgaria, on the land there is a small cottage made of wood. And in that wooden cottage, next to the hearth, there is a woman and her child. Mara, the girl is called. And you'll find them sitting there, spinning, 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 speaking and laughing, crying and singing. Dragana sedzi v gradinách, máme dragana, dragano. V gradina podběhal trenda fil, máme dragana, dragano. Speaking, telling stories, singing, and always spinning. One day the daughter said to the mother, Mamo, iskam do učida na sedjanka. To go to a sedjanka, the mother said. To a gathering, to a neighbour's house, to a party. You've never asked me that before, daughter. Well, I suppose you can, but here is this bag of tow. You must spin every single last part of the tow. If you do not, I will turn into a cow. Into a cow, Mara thought. But she agreed, and so she went. She went to a sedjanka. Oh, how wonderful it was to be there with all her friends, and to spin and to sing and to dance and to laugh, and she span. She span as fast as she could. She span until her fingers were raw. She span until her hands were stiff. She span until her fingers bled. And she still kept on spinning, spinning and spinning. And as she was on the last distaff, the 9th distaff, her father knocked and came to collect her. Her father who'd just been to market. Her father who had finished earlier than usual. The sun hadn't quite yet set. He could hear the maidens laughing and singing, and he thought it was a little bit early, but he still went in and called for her. How could she refuse her father? She could not refuse her father. She never dared to refuse her father. And so she left, and she went with him. They walked without saying a word, him carrying a bunch of leeks in his hands from the market. They knocked on the front door, but there was no open door, no greeting, no smile. Just a moo. The sound of a cow from inside, and she knew. They knocked and they shouted, and eventually the father broke down the door. And there in front, in the cool of the front room, there was a snow-white cow. And Mara knew. She knew that she had not worked hard enough. She knew that she had not spun hard enough, and because of that, her mother, her dear mother, had turned into a cow. The husband was confused. He looked for his wife, but Mara did not tell him. How could she? Such shame, such guilt. From that day on, grief washed over her like a tide. Time passed, days, weeks, months. And eventually the man married another wife. Mara got a stepmother. She was nice enough. She smiled, but it was not her mother. And with that cow that stayed in the barn, Mara would nuzzle her head next to the neck of a cow, and I would stay there and embrace for what seemed like hours. Heartbeat next to heartbeat. She would sing to her cow, She would laugh, but mostly she would cry. Her father and her stepmother looked. What a curious relationship with a cow. It was not natural. It was not normal. And so one day the stepmother said to her husband, "Husband, this cow does not produce milk. She is barren. She only eats and costs us money. Slaughter her for our dinner." Mara heard the news, the words as she was hiding behind the door. Her heart sank. What could she do? And so she chose not to be there on the day that it happened. A meal was cooked. The smell lingered across the room and the stepmother cooked joyously. And Mara was welcomed. "Yash," they said. "Yash, yash. Толку вам много хранаема, yash." But she would not eat. She would look, try to hide her sorrow, but she would not eat. When all the meat was finished, she gathered all the bones, and instead of throwing them to the dogs at the crossroads, she gathered them, bone and sinew, and she took them to the hearth, and bone mixed with tears, she buried them deep down in the soft ash of the hearth. And she wept. So hollow was she that you could have made a drum out of her. Time passed, and Mara lay by that fireplace day after day, night after night, with the bones of her mother. So much so that her name became Mara Pepelashka, Mara Cinderella. At some point in the year, on the time of weddings, there was, of course, a wedding. And everybody in the village was invited, and the stepmother and her husband, they were so excited. "You should come," they said to Mara. "Come to the wedding, there'll be dancing, there'll be food, it will be good for you." "Look at me," she said. "I am all covered in ash. My clothes, my face, my hair. What am I going to do at a wedding? You go. I'll stay here." And no matter how much convincing, they went, and she was left there in her usual place by the hearth. She fell asleep. She fell into a deep and dream-filled sleep in which she heard the voice of her mother telling her to go to that hearth, dig deep, uncover the bones, and there she will find a dress. "Put the dress on," said the mother, "and go to the wedding." Mara woke up with a fright, her heart beating inside of her chest. She went to that hearth and started uncovering the bones, fingers deep inside that ash, until she saw a dress. A dress as golden like the sun, silver like the moon, sparkling like the stars, and shoes golden. She cleaned her face, put on her new dress, put on her shoes, and went on the back path to the village. No one saw her. They were all at the wedding. And she entered. And as she entered, it was like the sun rose. Everyone turned to look at this girl. Who was she? And she joined the hurrah, that dance that goes round, and led it. And people stepped back. As she danced, she was almost hovering above the ground, and people sat there, stood, waited, with mouths agape. And as she watched, she knew it was time to go before her parents got there, and she ran out the door. And as she ran quickly, she lost one of her golden shoes, but she had no time to go back. And she ran through the back ways and entered that cottage panting, buried the clothes back in the hearth, put cinders and put ash on her face and lay back down, the place that she knew was home. When her father and stepmother entered, they began telling her, "Oh, да знаеш какво стана днеска на сватбата, такова момиче, такава рокля, като злато, като слънце, като луна, като звезди. О, мале, да ти кажа какво нещо стана, да беше там. Mara said nothing. She just smiled politely. She just laughed. Mostly, she just stared a blank look. The following day, the king and his men were taking the horses out, and they needed to go and water the horses. And the horse went back and started neighing. Something scared him in the water. "Let me see," they said. And as they looked, they saw something golden, glittering in the water. And the king wanted to go and see what it is, and he pulled a golden shoe. "Look at this shoe," he said. "I am the king of this land, and I do not have such shoes. I do not have such items. If this is so rich, if this is such beauty, imagine the person that was wearing it." And so he gave an order that all the women were brought to his palace in a line, one by one, to try the shoe. And so the command was given, and all the women began to come whispering and giggling and laughing in a single line, and one by one they tried and they tried and tried, but the shoe did not fit. "Has everybody come?" said the king. "Has there been anyone who disobeyed my rule?" "Everyone's here," they said, "apart from a useless girl, Mara Pepelashka. She is covered in ash. She does not wash. She just stays there. A crazy girl, they say. She did not come, but it is clear it is not hers anyway. Bring her to me," said the king. And so Mara Pepelashka was brought. And as soon as she tried that golden shoe, it fit like a second skin. And the king could not believe his eyes. The dress was brought. She put it on. Oh, such beauty. Everybody gasped. "This is the girl from the wedding," people would say. "I will marry this girl," the king said. Mara Pepelashka, a girl without a mother, to become a queen. How wonderful. No one asked her. Did she want to marry the king? She had no choice. Women had no choice in those days, and so she went. There was a wedding. Oh, such a feast. Such beautiful food, such heavy laden tables, they almost creaked from the weight. Dancing and drinking and singing. Mara made a wonderful queen. A wise queen. A queen with kindness, with compassion. How could she not? Everything she had gone through taught her the most important lessons in life. And that king and queen in that kingdom, it is said that due to Mara the queen, that kingdom was one of the most successful, kind and just ones that time has ever known across the whole land.